Hello, good people. Time for another video. I received a very nice and interesting um, email from Phil in Buffalo. I thought I would take the time to answer it via video. Um, he says, the more I try to acquire some smarts about 60s Yamaha classical guitars, the more confused I get. I like the 60s nylon guitars. And then he lists a few examples from Martin, Guild, Harmony, what have you. Which we all like. And then it says he puts K&K classic pickups on each one. They all come alive from the Tomastic Infeld John Pierce PJ 116s I use exclusively. Sounds like a really good setup, actually. I like the I like the K&K classic as well. It's a really good pickup and it's quite easy to install. I'm looking for a 1960s number G or G series. Much of the inflow is conflicting. Is white label better than red label? The G's, do they have better fan bracing? They better built than the G's better built than the no G's, number G's. Taiwan built better than Japan built. Some factories are better than others. Do you have any links, suggestions, or sources for these kinds of guitars? Well, the quick answer for the final question is no. I tend to pick up Yamahas, use Yamahas wherever I can get them, but there is no particular source for them. You will normally find them at really well stocked sort of used guitar shops, sort of the vintage type guitar shops. There'll always be an old Yamaha or two knocking around, but you'll pay full, sort of used retail price for them, and I don't ever pay full retail price for anything. So you're basically restricted to, sort of jumble sales, flea markets, what have you. And of course, eBay, and probably other online sites as well. You just got to hunt for them. You pick them up in all conditions. A lot of times they need lots of work. A lot of times they need neck resets. That's just the what you get with guitars from the 50s, 60s, 70s. They've had hard lives because they're good playing guitars, and people buy them because they were economical. So they're normally well played. You don't normally find an old Yamaha that's sort of been sitting in a closet and in pristine condition. They're usually quite beat up, from my experience anyway. As far as the white label versus red label, I'll give you some information in a minute, but it's really case by case. You can get prompts from various online sites about which is better, which series to look for, but in my experience, it's very much a case by case thing, and there's no strict laws about which is better between the red, white, Taiwan, Japan built. I mean, basically, the white labels were built as the Japanese guitars, and the red labels were usually their import series, but they're also green labels and other labels as well. And also, there's not always consistency across a single model. In other words, you'll find fan variations, fretwood variations. Not a lot, but you will find them, and you'll often find misnomers in the way they're labeled as well. Sometimes these G's and NOGs are, sort of interchangeable. As far as factories go, you might be able to hunt down information on particular factories. However, for a lot of the models, it's kind of hazy as to what the provenance is and where they actually come from. One helpful site is the Yamaha site itself, yamahaguitars.nl. So I'll just give you a few points from there. The most famous red label Nippon Gaki was introduced to Yamaha for a very short period as a green label. So there you have some variants on the label colors now. Green labels come on some FG150s, FG300s, FG180s. These are very early sort of Yamaha models around the 66 period and the very beginning of the FG series. You might find some green labels on 67 and 68 FGs, but that's when they started working in the red labels. Despite those green labels, the Nippon Gaki red label, which probably we're all familiar with, those of us who pick up Yamahas, is considered the start of the FG series. Around 71, 72, Yamaha on the website sort of pinpoint 72 as a start of overseas production. That's when you start getting non-Japanese variances into the market. They kept the red label for this purpose. So your question about Taiwanese versus Japanese, from 72 onwards, not before 72 obviously for reasons we just discussed, but from 72 onwards, the red label normally denotes the overseas markets for Yamaha. You can find Nippon Gaki on a white label as well, and you can also find Taiwanese on white labels as well. So again, it's not a hard, fast situation here. So there's not really a rule to go by. For instance, they have on this site, they have examples of Taiwanese guitars in green, white, and red labels. But it's basically the date that determines when the shift to overseas production was, and they have that around 72. It's not a hard date either. The black label comes in around 73, 74. Most of the black label FGs were produced 74 and after, and were normally made in Taiwan. You do get Nippon Gaki black labels as well, and around 76 to 77, Yamaha changes from a square label to an oval label, and even introduces an orange variant. For instance, so if you get like a 77, post 77 FG 301 or a 512, it could be a white or an orange label, but it's now going to be an oval label. Almost all the white oval labels are made in made in Taiwan, and the orange label says made in Japan. But however, there are some rare white oval labels that are Nippon Gaki made in Japan as well. See what the problem is here? Do you see what I'm talking about as far as trying to understand? And I guess this is the root of Phil's email to me, is he's probably looked at this information, scratching his head. One big exception from about early FG models from 71, Yamaha also introduced a special line of hand-built FGs that had a leather label, including a signature on them. Those are probably quite rare. So as you can see, just from going to Yamaha's website, which I'm sure that the person asking the question has done, it doesn't really clear up a lot of stuff. There's so many variances in this, in the old Yamahas, that I almost sort of ignore everything but how it feels and how it plays, because even when you figure out, say if you have a white or red or green or orange or oval or square label, and you figure out what the provenance is, it's still not really going to determine whether the guitar is the top of their line or one of their better models. I really think it goes case by case. I've had some red labels that are brilliant playing guitars, and I've had some that aren't. Very few that aren't, but I've also found a lot of oval labels that are good playing guitars as well, and those are much later in the FG span. So, the real answer to your question is no. There is no quick way of figuring this out. There's certainly no source for this stuff. They were produced en masse to the student market throughout the 60s and 70s and 80s as probably the number one bang for buck student guitar. So they are all over the place. They're all over. I found them all over the US when I was there. I find them in the UK. There's probably quite a few knocking around in Europe and still in Asia as well. So they're ubiquitous. You find them, but you don't find them generally in places that sell only new guitars. You find them usually in very used, sort of antique type guitar shops or thrift shops or jumble shops, and they almost always need at least a really good setup, if not more serious work. There are loads of videos on YouTube of people taking on old Yamahas, and there are loads of players and luthiers alike swearing that they're great guitars when you get them back into pristine playing condition, and I can corroborate that. I almost always pick them up if they are a good price because they are so reliable. However, I've picked up a few that were more work than I really wanted at the time of purchase. So be aware that a lot of these guitars need a lot of work, and also the FG line and a lot of the older Yamaha guitars predate the truss rod, the movable truss rod. So you do have some steel reinforced non-correctable necks in the Yamaha market, and of course they have a lot of nylon or parlor style guitars that were made for sort of silk and steel type strings that have neck issues as well. So it really is a case by case market, and if you can find some old Yamahas, they're great to learn the craft on. They're great to sort of work with because the payoff is usually pretty decent, as opposed to say old Harmonies, old Ks, old Stellas, which tend to be a lot more punishing and a lot more expensive to get back into playing condition. So that's sort of my take on Yamaha. It's a really good question. I thought it deserved a video, and Yamaha, of course, is still the number one student guitar. If anybody comes to me anywhere that I've ever lived and they say, I've only got $100, £100 to buy a guitar, I will almost always say, go get the latest FG series Yamaha. Right now, I think it's still the 800 series, isn't it? The 700 series was really good. The 800 series, I think, is $199 on Amazon. And I think that's also the same in pounds. Maybe it's a bit more now, maybe like $219 or something. But, you can't really beat it for a couple of hundred. It's hard to beat. They're solid top instruments. They're well made. They're well graduated. The woods are decent. The fret jobs are very well done. And you're getting probably a guitar that plays more like a $400 or $500 guitar than a $200 guitar, as comparing with other brands. So there's still number one, and there will always be Yamaha guitars floating around. I still have an old Yamaha electric, and I've had loads and loads and loads of different Yamahas over the years, and have enjoyed them. So there's my take on Yamaha. There's no real way to ascertain a sort of science in how they were demarked, how to striate the quality and even the provenance of those instruments. And a lot of people spend a lot of time trying, but my advice is just to, when you find them, is just go by case. If you're looking for a specific model from a specific factory, it's going to be difficult, but not impossible. If you know exactly what you're looking for, you'll probably be able to find it on eBay or one of the auction sites, but it will probably need a considerable amount of work. So there you go. That's Yamaha, older guitars on the used market might take. Hope it's helpful. See you next time.